Hi guys, welcome back. This is Linda's Mafia Romance audio stories. And for today's story is about a billionaire who burnt his empire for a hairstylist who refuses to love him until he proves worthy.
Mira Thorne had been cutting hair for 11 years, and in that time she had learned to read a man by the way he sat in a barber's chair. The nervous ones crossed their ankles and checked their phones every 90 seconds. The arrogant ones leaned back with their eyes closed, as if the world existed only to serve them. The lonely ones talked too much, filling silence with the names of dead wives and estranged children. But Victor Drajan was none of these. Victor Drajan sat like a man who had forgotten how to be touched without flinching. He came every Tuesday at 4 o'clock, when the salon was quiet and the other stylists had already packed away their combs. He never booked an appointment through the front desk. He simply appeared, and the receptionist, a woman named Anya, who feared nothing except perhaps God and her landlord, would gesture toward the back room where Mira waited. That was the arrangement. That had been the arrangement for 8 months. Ever since Victor had walked in on a rainy Thursday, pointed at Mira without a word, and sat down in her chair as though he owned the building. Later she learned that he did. Mira did not know the word mafia in relation to Victor Drajan. Not yet. What she knew was this. His suits cost more than her monthly rent. His hands never rested on the armrests, but always lay flat on his thighs, as if ready to strike. And his eyes, dark, flat, the color of wet slate, followed her every movement in the mirror's reflection. He did not blink often. That was the first thing she noticed. The second was that he never smiled, not once. Not even the tight, polite smile that rich men gave to service workers. His face was a wall. And yet he kept coming back. She had offered to fire him as a client 3 times. The first time, Anya laughed and said Victor would burn the salon down before he let anyone else touch his hair. The second time, Mira found her tip envelope stuffed with $5,000 and a single typed word, stay. The third time, she walked out to her car after closing and found Victor leaning against the driver's door, arms crossed, waiting in the dark. He did not threaten her. He said only, you haven't asked me what I do for a living. She replied, I don't care what you do. I care that you're blocking my car. He moved. But he smiled then. Just a flicker, just a crack in the wall. And Mira felt something cold slide down her spine. Not fear. Worse. Curiosity. That was 3 months ago. Now it was a Tuesday in late autumn, and the sky outside the salon windows was the color of old bruises. Mira set out her scissors, her clippers, her straight razor with the pearl handle that her grandmother had left her. She heated the towel warmer and measured out the sandalwood oil that Victor never requested but never rejected. He arrived at 4:03, 3 minutes late, which was unlike him. Sergei, the large man who always stood 2 paces behind Victor, remained by the door instead of taking his usual post near the magazines. Sergei's jaw was clenched. Victor's left sleeve was torn at the cuff, and though the fabric was dark, Mira could see the glisten of something wet and black spreading toward his wrist. She said nothing. That was her way. She gestured to the chair, and Victor sat. He removed his jacket himself. Sergei did not move to help, and draped it over his knees. The tear in his sleeve revealed a long, shallow cut along his forearm, already scabbing, already angry. Mira picked up her comb and began to section his hair as if nothing were wrong. She did not ask about the wound. She did not offer a bandage. She had learned that Victor Drajan did not want a nurse. He wanted someone who would not recoil. The haircut proceeded in the usual silence, broken only by the snip of steel and the soft fall of dark hair onto the black cape. Mira worked from the crown downward, following the natural whirl of his hair, the slight wave at the nape that he insisted she leave longer than fashion dictated. She had learned his head the way a pianist learns a difficult piece, by repetition, by touch, by the small rebellions of muscle memory. She knew that the left side of his jaw twitched when he was thinking hard. She knew that he exhaled slower when her fingers brushed his temple. She did not know his last name until much later, but she knew the geography of his skull better than she knew her own daughter's. At 4:47, the back door of the salon opened. Mira heard it, a soft click, then a groan of hinges that needed oiling. That door led to the storage room, which led to the alley. No client ever used that door. Anya had left an hour ago. Mira kept cutting. Victor's eyes in the mirror did not move toward the sound, but his hands, flat on his thighs, curled into fists. Then she heard the voices. 2 men, maybe 3. Low, urgent, a particular rhythm of men who were trying not to be overheard. One of them said something that ended in a sharp crack, not a voice crack, a body crack, like a fist meeting a cheekbone. Then a wet groan. Then a voice, higher now, pleading. Please, I didn't know. I didn't know she was yours. Myra's scissors stopped. Victor's eyes met hers in the mirror. He did not look away. Neither did she. Keep cutting, he said. His voice was soft. That was the terrifying part. He did not whisper, did not snarl. He spoke as though asking for a glass of water. Myra's hand resumed moving. The scissors opened and closed. A lock of hair fell. In the back room, someone began to cry. Not sob, but cry. The way grown men cry when they understand that begging will not save them. There was another crack, wetter this time, followed by a thud that could have been a body hitting a concrete floor. Then dragging. Then a door slamming. Then silence. Mira finished the left side of Victor's head. She moved to the right. Her hands did not shake. That was the strange thing. Her heart hammered against her ribs like a caged animal, but her fingers remained steady, parting and snipping and combing, as though the only violence in the room was the tug of a tangled strand. She had learned steadiness the hard way, from years of cutting the hair of drunks who lurched, of children who squirmed, of old men with tremors in their necks. But she had never learned to be steady while listening to a man die. Or perhaps she had. Perhaps that was what Victor saw in her. Perhaps that was why he kept coming back. At 4:55, she set down her scissors and picked up the straight razor. The pearl handle was warm from her palm. She shaved the fine hairs at his nape, tilted his head forward with 2 fingers on his crown, and worked in short, precise strokes. Victor's breathing changed, slower, deeper, as though the razor against his skin was the only peace he had known in weeks. When she finished, she wiped his neck with a warm towel, brushed the loose hair from his shoulders, and unfastened the cape. Done, she said. Her voice did not shake either. Victor stood. He did not look in the mirror to check her work. He never did. He pulled a folded stack of cash from his trouser pocket, always cash, never a card, and placed it on the counter. Then he paused. Sergei was already at the front door, holding it open. The street outside was dark and ordinary. A woman walked a small dog. A taxi idled at the curb. The world continued. But Victor did not leave. Instead, he walked toward the back room, toward the storage room, toward the door that was now slightly ajar, a sliver of fluorescent light spilling through. Mira could have looked away. She should have looked away. But something in her, the same stubborn refusal to flinch that had kept her alive through poverty and bad men and a daughter born too early, made her step forward instead. She pushed the door open with one finger. The room smelled of copper and sweat and something else, something chemical and sharp that she later learned was gunpowder. A man lay on the floor near the boxes of shampoo concentrate. He was not dead, not yet, but his face was a ruin, swollen, split, leaking from places a face should not leak. His hands were bound behind his back with a zip tie. He looked up at Mira with one eye, the other already sealed shut, and tried to speak. What came out was a wet rasp. Help! Mira did not move. She did not scream. She stood in the doorway for 3 full seconds, taking in the blood on the floor, the broken tooth near the drain, the way the man's fingers had turned purple from the tightness of the tie. Then she heard Victor behind her. His presence was a wall of heat and threat, so close that her back almost touched his chest. He did not grab her. He did not threaten her. He placed one hand on the doorframe beside her head and leaned in until his mouth was near her ear. And he whispered, not a growl, not a snarl, but a low, wondering voice, as if he had just discovered something precious and terrifying. Asterisk, you don't fear me. That's why I keep coming back. Asterisk. Mira turned her head. Her cheek almost brushed his jaw. She could smell sandalwood and iron. She looked him directly in the eyes, those flat, dark, unblinking eyes, and said nothing. She did not nod. She did not shake her head. She simply looked at him the way she looked at a snagged hair or a dull blade, as a problem to be managed, not a master to be served. Victor's hand fell from the doorframe. He stepped back. For the first time in 8 months, he looked uncertain. It lasted only a fraction of a second, but Mira saw it. She filed it away. Then he straightened his cuffs, the torn sleeve, the bloody forearm, and walked out through the front door. Sergei followed. The bell above the door chimed once, a cheerful sound that belonged to a different world. Mira stood alone in the storage room with the ruined man. She did not call an ambulance. She did not run. She pulled out her phone and dialed Anya, who answered on the first ring and said only, "Tell me you didn't see anything." "I saw everything," Mira said. There was a long pause. Then Anya sighed, the sound of a woman who had cleaned up too many messes for too many dangerous men. "Then you need to leave town tonight. Take your daughter. Go somewhere he won't find you." Mira looked down at the man on the floor. His one good eye had rolled back. He was still breathing, but barely. She thought of Victor's whisper, "You don't fear me." She thought of her daughter's face, her small hands, her laughter that sounded like bells. She thought of the $5,000 still tucked inside her copy of Jane Eyre because she had been too proud to spend a single bill. "No," Mira said. "I'm not running. I didn't do anything wrong." "Mira, I just cut his hair, Anya. That's all I do. That's all I'll ever do." She hung up. Then she locked the storage room door, washed her hands in the staff sink until the water ran clear, gathered her scissors and her comb and her grandmother's straight razor, and walked to her car. Her hands did not shake until she was inside with the doors locked. Then they shook for 10 minutes straight. She gripped the steering wheel until her knuckles ached and told herself that Victor Drajan was just a client, a dangerous client, but just a client. She drove home to her daughter. She made macaroni and cheese. She read a bedtime story about a rabbit who wasn't afraid of the dark. And when her daughter asked, "Mommy, why are your hands cold?" Mira kissed her forehead and said, "Because winter is coming, sweetheart." It was a lie. The cold in her hands had nothing to do with the weather. It had everything to do with the way Victor Drajan had looked at her in the mirror. Not as a woman, not as a servant, but as the only thing in the room that was not afraid of him. And the worst part, the part she would not admit even to herself, was that he was right. She was not afraid of him. She was afraid of the woman she might become if she stayed. But she stayed anyway, because the rent was due, because her daughter needed new shoes, because running cost money that Mira Thorne did not have, and because somewhere deep in the part of her that she kept locked away, she wanted to see what Victor Drajan would do next. The first gift arrived the morning after the storage room. Mira found it on her doorstep at 5:47 a.m., tucked inside a velvet box that had not been there when she took her daughter to the bathroom at 3. Inside lay a pair of diamond hairpins, each stone cut into a teardrop, each prong fashioned from white gold. There was no card, no name. But Mira knew. She walked to the dumpster behind her apartment building and dropped the box inside without opening it again. The second gift came by courier at noon. A key fob to a brand new sedan parked 2 blocks away, silver, still bearing dealership tags. The courier handed her an envelope with a single typed sentence, "Your tires are bald. Take it." Mira handed the envelope back. She told the courier to return the car to whatever address was listed on his manifest. The courier, a young man with acne and frightened eyes, said there was no return address. Mira kept the key fob long enough to walk to the sedan, unlock it, and leave the keys on the driver's seat. She walked home in the rain. The third gift arrived via her daughter's school. An anonymous donor had paid the year's tuition in full, including lunches, field trips, and aftercare. The principal called Mira, sounding confused and delighted. Mira hung up, called the bank, and arranged to have the exact amount refunded to the original payment method. The bank told her the payment had come from a private trust that did not accept returns. Mira drove to the school, wrote a check from her savings account, every penny she had set aside for 2 years, and handed it to the principal personally. That night, she ate rice and beans for dinner while her daughter asked why there was no me. Victor did not come for his Tuesday appointment, or the next Tuesday. The salon felt different without him, lighter, but also emptier, like a room after a funeral when the mourners have gone home, but the flowers are still everywhere. Anya kept glancing at the door. The other stylists whispered. Mira said nothing. She cut the hair of lawyers and accountants and one retired dentist who talked about his orchids. She smiled when she was supposed to smile. She did not look at the mirror and expect to see dark eyes staring back. On the third Tuesday, a man in a gray suit appeared at the reception desk. Not Sergey. A thinner man with a nervous mustache and a clipboard. He told Anya that Victor Drajan would no longer require the salon services. Anya asked why. The man slid a letter across the counter. Anya read it, turned pale, and walked to the back room where Mira was sweeping hair into a dustpan. You're fired, Anya said. Her voice was flat, not angry, resigned. Mira stopped sweeping. You can't fire me. I'm the only one who knows how to fix Mrs. Castellano's layers. Victor owns the building. He owns the salon. He owns the lease, the chairs, the combs, the shampoo bowls. And he just terminated your employment contract. Signed and notarized. Anya held up the letter. Effective immediately. You have 15 minutes to clear out your station. Mira looked at the letter. The paper was thick, creamy, the kind that cost $5 a sheet. The signature at the bottom was Victor's, not a scrawl, but a precise, almost calligraphic hand. He had signed it the way he did everything, without wasted motion, without mercy. She set down her broom. She gathered her scissors, her combs, her grandmother's straight razor. She packed them into a canvas tote bag that smelled of lavender. She did not cry. She did not ask why. She walked out the front door and stood on the sidewalk in the gray autumn light. And for the first time in 11 years, she did not have a job. Her phone rang before she reached her car. Unknown number. She answered because she had a daughter, and sometimes the school called from blocked lines. Ms. Thorne. Victor's voice. Quiet, smooth, as if he had not just destroyed her livelihood. I believe you are now available for private appointments. Mira stopped walking. A pigeon pecked at a discarded French fry near her shoe. The sky was the color of old dishwater. You had me fired. I liberated you from a suboptimal work environment. That's not what liberation means. My penthouse. Tuesdays and Thursdays. 4 o'clock. Triple your previous salary. Cash. Up front. A pause. I need someone who knows my head. Mira closed her eyes. She thought of her savings account, now empty because she had returned the tuition payment. She thought of her daughter's shoes, the ones with the soles peeling away from the uppers. She thought of the rice and beans in her pantry and the way her daughter had asked for chicken nuggets last night. Just once. Just a small bag from the freezer section. She thought about pride. Then she thought about hunger. They were not the same thing, no matter what the poem said. I cut hair, Mira said. Asterisk, that's all. I don't clean. I don't cook. I don't run errands. I don't listen to confessions. And I don't pretend to like you. Asterisk. Asterisk understood. Asterisk. Asterisk. I'm not your girlfriend. I'm not your therapist. I'm not your property. Asterisk. Asterisk understood. Asterisk. Asterisk. And if you ever touch me without my permission, I will put my grandmother's razor across your throat before your bodyguard can draw his gun. Asterisk. There was a long silence. When Victor spoke again, his voice had changed. Not softer. Something else. Something that sounded almost like wonder. Asterisk. Tuesday. 4 o'clock. I'll send a car. Asterisk. He hung up. The penthouse was on the top floor of a building that did not have a name. Only an address that Mira had never heard of and could not find on her phone's map until the third try. The elevator required a fingerprint. The hallway was carpeted in charcoal gray so thick that her footsteps made no sound. Sergey met her at the door, nodded once, and stepped aside. The first thing Mira noticed was the smell. Not sandalwood this time, but something cleaner, cedar, maybe, or vetiver. The second thing was the windows. Floor to ceiling, wall to wall. A view of the city that made her stomach drop because it looked like the whole world was kneeling at Victor Drajan's feet. The third thing was the chair. It was a barber's chair. Not just any barber's chair. It was the exact model she had pointed to in a trade magazine 8 months ago, during her third appointment with Victor, when he had asked her what she would change about the salon, and she had said, without thinking, the chairs. The old ones hurt my back. There's this vintage recast from Italy, pistachio green, hydraulic lift, armrests that actually fit a woman's elbow. She had not mentioned it again. She had assumed he had not been listening. The chair was pistachio green. The hydraulic lift was new, smooth, silent. The armrests curved inward just enough to support a woman's elbows. Beside the chair stood a rolling cart of her favorite products, the ones she used to have to buy with her own money because the salon stocked cheaper brands. There was a mirror in front of the chair, wide and well lit, with no cracks or stains. There was even a small table holding a cup of tea, still steaming, brewed exactly the way she liked it. Black, no sugar, a single slice of lemon floating on top. Mira stood in the doorway. She did not sit in the chair. She did not thank him. She turned to look at Victor, who was standing near the windows with his hands in his pockets, wearing a charcoal sweater and the same flat, unreadable expression he always wore. But his jaw was tight. His left hand, she noticed, was not in his pocket. It was hanging at his side, fingers slightly curled, as if he were resisting the urge to reach for something or someone. "You built me a salon," she said. I built you a chair. In your home. In my home. Mira walked to the cart. She picked up a bottle of shampoo, read the label, set it down. She touched the armrest of the chair, real leather, not vinyl, still soft from the box. She looked at her reflection in the mirror. She looked tired. She looked thin. She looked like a woman who had been running for so long that she had forgotten what it felt like to stand still. "This doesn't change anything," she said to his reflection. He was standing behind her now, closer than she had realized. Not touching, never touching, but close enough that she could feel the warmth of him, the weight of his attention pressing against her back like a hand that had not yet landed. "I know," he said. I will never love you. She said it clearly, deliberately, the way she might announce a price or a boundary or a warning. She said it to the mirror so that he could see her face when she said it. No trembling, no tears, just the flat truth of a woman who had learned that love was a luxury she could not afford, especially not from a man who kept a bloody man on a storage room floor. Victor did not flinch. He did not argue. He did not tell her she was wrong, or that she would change her mind, or that he could make her love him if he tried hard enough. Instead, he smiled. It was not the flicker she had seen before, not the crack in the wall. It was something slower, deeper, more patient. It was the smile of a man who had waited years for something, and was willing to wait years more. "We'll see," he said. And Mira, standing in her pistachio green chair, with her grandmother's razor in her bag, and her daughter's face in her heart, felt something cold and unwelcome settle into her chest. Not fear, not desire, something worse. The beginning of respect, the beginning of doubt, the beginning of the terrible possibility that Victor Drajan might actually understand her better than anyone ever had. She picked up her scissors. She pointed to the empty chair, not the barber's chair, the one across from it, the one where the client sat. "Sit down," she said. Your hair is a disaster. He sat, and for the first time in 3 weeks, Mira Thorne cut Victor Drajan's hair. She did not speak to him except to tilt his head. She did not meet his eyes except in the mirror. She did not think about the diamond hairpins in the dumpster, or the car she had refused, or the tuition check she had written with hands that were no longer shaking. She thought only about the scissors in her hand, the hair falling to the floor, and the slow, steady rhythm of a Tuesday afternoon that felt less like a job and more like a trap closing. When she finished, she packed her tools without a word. Victor stood, straightened his collar, and walked her to the elevator. He did not try to kiss her hand or touch her shoulder or whisper in her ear. He simply pressed the call button and stepped back. "Thursday," he said. Mira stepped into the elevator. The doors began to close. In the narrowing gap, she saw Victor Drajan standing alone in his pentacle of glass and steel, hands in his pockets, watching her go. And she saw, just before the door sealed shut, that he was not smiling anymore. He was not frowning either. He was simply looking at her the way a man looks at a locked door when he knows he has the key, but has promised not to use it. The elevator descended. Mira leaned her forehead against the cool brass wall and closed her eyes. I will never love him, she thought, but the thought felt thinner than it had an hour ago. And that, more than the diamonds or the car or the tuition, was what terrified her. The first month was silence. Not the uncomfortable silence of strangers trapped in an elevator, but the dense, textured silence of two people who had said everything necessary and nothing more. Mira arrived at the penthouse every Tuesday and Thursday at 4 o'clock. She set up her tools. She draped the black cape over Victor's shoulders. She cut his hair in precise, economical movements. And she did not speak unless speech was required for the task at hand. Asterisk, tilt your head. Hold still. I need to work on the left side. Asterisk, Victor obeyed without complaint. He did not try to make conversation. He did not ask about her day, or her daughter, or her reasons for staying. He sat in the client chair, a simple leather armchair he had moved opposite the pistachio-green barber's chair, and he let her work. His eyes followed her in the mirror, but he had stopped smiling. He had stopped doing anything except watching. Mira told herself this was good. This was professional. This was exactly what she had demanded. She was not his friend. She was not his confidant. She was a woman who cut hair for money, and the money was good enough that she had bought her daughter new shoes, and a winter coat, and a small pink bicycle that she kept hidden in the storage closet until Christmas. She had stopped eating rice and beans. She had started sleeping through the night. These were victories. She refused to feel guilty about them. But the silence began to change in the 5th week. It started small. A single sentence from Victor as she trimmed his sideburns. Asterisk, my father used to cut my hair. He was not gentle. Asterisk, Mira said nothing. She kept cutting, but she noted the way his voice dropped on the word gentle, the way his hands curled into fists on his thighs. She noted it the way she noted a cowlick or a scar, as information, not invitation. The next Tuesday, another sentence. Asterisk, I was 17 the first time I killed a man. He was older. He deserved it. But I dreamed about his face for a year. Asterisk, Mira paused with her scissors mid-snip. She looked at Victor's reflection. He was not looking at her. He was looking at his own hands, which were no longer fists but open, almost vulnerable, resting palms up on his knees as though waiting for something to be placed inside them. She resumed cutting. She did not ask who the man was or why he deserved it. She did not offer comfort or judgment. She simply listened. And Victor, who had never needed anyone's permission to speak, continued. He told her about his mother, who had died when he was 12, not from violence, but from a disease that had no cure and no dignity. He told her about his brother Roman, older by 4 years, who had taught Victor how to hold a knife, and then how to hold a grudge. He told her about the loneliness of power, not the loneliness of being alone, but the loneliness of being surrounded by people who were afraid of you. Fear is not company, he said one Thursday evening, as Mira combed out a tangle near his crown. Asterisk, fear is an echo. It only repeats what you already know. Asterisk, Mira set down her comb. She looked at him. Really looked, not as a client but as a person. His face was the same wall it had always been, but the cracks were multiplying. She could see them now. The fine lines around his eyes, the slight downturn of his mouth when he thought she wasn't watching, the way his left hand trembled sometimes when he reached for his glass of water. He was not a monster. He was a man who had done monstrous things. There was a difference. She was not sure the difference mattered. Asterisk, why are you telling me this? Asterisk, she asked. Her voice was neutral, but her heart was beating faster than it should have been. Victor turned his head to look at her directly, not through the mirror. His eyes were the same flat slate, but there was something moving beneath them now, something that looked almost like exhaustion. Asterisk, because you are the only person in the world who does not want anything from me. You do not want my money. You do not want my protection. You do not want my power. You want to cut my hair. That is all. And that. Asterisk, he paused, swallowed, looked away. Asterisk, that is the most honest thing anyone has ever wanted from me. Asterisk, Mira did not know what to say, so she said nothing. She finished the haircut in silence, but the silence was different now. Softer, More dangerous, because silence, she was learning, was not empty. Silence was a room where things grew in the dark. The 6th week brought a change in routine. Victor began to stay in the client chair after the haircut was finished. He did not ask her to stay. He simply remained seated, and Mira found herself putting away her tools more slowly, wiping down the cart with unnecessary care, lingering near the window where the city lights blinked on one by one as the sun sank behind the skyline. They did not speak during these lingering minutes. They simply existed in the same space, breathing the same air, watching the same lights. It was not intimacy. It was not friendship. It was something unnamed and unnameable, and Mira told herself every Tuesday and Thursday that it meant nothing. But her daughter noticed. "Mommy, you're smiling more," the girl said one morning, spooning cereal into her mouth with the of a small person who had not yet learned that happiness was complicated. Mira touched her own face, surprised. She had not realized she was smiling. She stopped. The night of the attack was a Thursday. Mira remembered because she had just finished a particularly difficult haircut. Victor had let his hair grow too long between appointments, and she had spent an extra 20 minutes correcting the shape. She was rinsing her scissors in the small sink near the barber's chair when she heard it. Not a sound exactly. A feeling. A change in pressure, like the moment before a thunderstorm when the air itself holds its breath. She looked up. Victor was already standing, already moving toward her, his body blocking the space between her and the windows. Then the glass exploded. It was not a bomb. It was bullets, a volley of them, fired from the building across the street, shattering the floor-to-ceiling windows in a cascade of glittering fragments that caught the light like frozen rain. Mira did not scream. She dropped to the floor, covering her head with her arms, and felt something heavy and warm land on top of her. Victor. He had thrown himself over her, his body a shield, his weight pressing her into the carpet as more bullets tore through the room. She heard Sergei shouting somewhere, then the sound of return fire, then footsteps, then silence. The silence lasted a long time, or maybe it was only seconds. Mira could not tell. She was aware of Victor's chest against her back, his breath ragged and hot against her neck, his arms caged around her head. She was aware of a wetness spreading across her shoulder, not her blood, his. She was aware that he had not hesitated. He had not pushed her aside, or used her as cover, or told her to run. He had covered her, like she mattered, like she was the thing worth protecting. Asterisk Victor. Asterisk her voice was strange, too calm. Asterisk, you're bleeding. Asterisk. Asterisk, I know. Asterisk. Asterisk, let me up. Asterisk. He did not move. His arms tightened. Asterisk, not yet. They might still be out there. Asterisk. Asterisk, you're bleeding on my favorite sweater. Asterisk. He laughed. It was the first time she had ever heard him laugh, a short, surprised sound, half-choked, as though he had forgotten how. He pushed himself up slowly, wincing, and Mira saw the blood. His left shoulder was dark with it, spreading through the charcoal fabric of his sweater like a stain on a map. The bullet had torn through the meat of his shoulder, missing bone, but not missing much else. He was pale. His hand, when he reached for her, was shaking. Mira stood. She looked at the destroyed windows, the shattered glass, the bullet holes puckering the far wall. She looked at Sergei, who was standing near the door with a gun still in his hand, his face unreadable. She looked at Victor, who was trying to stand and failing, his knees buckling beneath him. "Sit down," she said. Not the voice of a stylist, the voice of a woman who had once been a nursing student, who had cleaned wounds and changed bandages and held the hands of strangers in a crowded emergency room before she had dropped out to care for her newborn daughter. Asterisk, sit down right now, Victor. Asterisk. He sat. He did not argue. He slumped into the client chair, his head falling back, his eyes closing. Mira pulled off her sweater, the one with his blood on the shoulder, and pressed it against the wound. He hissed through his teeth, but did not push her away. Sergei appeared at her elbow with a medical kit, the kind that belonged in a battlefield, full of things she had not touched since nursing school. She opened it. She found gauze, antiseptic, a curved needle, surgical thread. Her hands were steady. They had always been steady. "You need a hospital," she said. "No." Asterisk, you could bleed out. Asterisk, asterisk, then you'll have to stitch me. Asterisk, he opened his eyes. They were dark, unfocused, but fixed on her face with an intensity that made her want to look away. Asterisk, I trust you. Asterisk, Mira had been trusted before, by clients who trusted her not to nick their ears, by her daughter, who trusted her to make the monsters under the bed go away. But she had never been trusted like this, by a man who had just taken a bullet for her, a man who was offering her his blood and his body and his silence. She picked up the needle. She threaded it with hands that did not shake. She cleaned the wound with antiseptic, while Victor bit down on a leather strap Sergei had produced from somewhere. And she stitched. She had not stitched a wound since her mother had died. Her mother had been a nurse, had taught Mira how to hold a needle the way other mothers taught their daughters to hold a spoon. Asterisk, steady hands, Mira. The body is just a garment. You're just mending the fabric. Asterisk, she had not thought of those words in years. But as she pulled the thread through Victor's skin, closing the ragged edges of the bullet wound with neat, even stitches, she heard her mother's voice as clearly as if the woman were standing in the room. Victor did not cry out. He did not flinch. He watched her work. His jaw clenched so tight she could see the cords in his neck, and when she tied the final knot and sat back on her heels, he reached out with his good arm and grabbed her wrist. His grip was not gentle. It was desperate. His fingers were slick with his own blood, and they left red prints on her skin. You saved me, he said. His voice was raw, scraped clean of its usual smoothness. Asterisk, you saved my life. Asterisk, asterisk, I stopped the bleeding. That's not the same thing. Asterisk, asterisk, you didn't run. Asterisk, asterisk, there was glass everywhere. Running would have been stupid. Asterisk, he pulled her closer, not roughly, slowly, inexorably, like a tide pulling a boat from its mooring. She could have resisted. She should have resisted, but her body did not seem to belong to her anymore. It belonged to the moment, to the blood on her hands, to the man in the chair who had covered her with his own body when the bullets came. He brought her wrist to his mouth. He did not kiss it. He pressed his lips to her pulse point, where her heart was hammering against her skin like a fist against a door. You're mine, he whispered against her wrist. Asterisk, you saved me. You're mine now. Asterisk. Mira pulled her hand away. She stood up. She walked to the sink and washed the blood from her fingers, scrubbing with soap that smelled of sandalwood, scrubbing until the water ran clear. Then she turned. Victor was still sitting in the chair, still bleeding through the gauze, still watching her with those dark, hungry eyes. Sergei had disappeared. They were alone in the ruined penthouse with the shattered windows and the cold wind and the weight of what had just happened pressing down on them like a physical thing. I saved you because I'm not a monster, Mira said. Her voice was steady. Her hands, still damp from the sink, hung at her sides. Asterisk, that doesn't make me yours. I am not a possession. I am not a trophy. I am not a reward for good behavior. I am a woman who cuts hair and stitches wounds and goes home to her daughter at night. That is all I am. That is all I will ever be. Asterisk. Victor said nothing. He did not argue. He did not apologize. He simply looked at her with an expression she could not name, something between defeat and devotion, something that looked like the beginning of prayer. And Mira, who had never prayed in her life, gathered her scissors and her comb and her grandmother's razor, and she walked to the elevator. She did not look back. She told herself that was strength. But that night, alone in her bed, with her daughter sleeping in the next room and the city quiet outside her window, Mira Thorne dreamed of Victor Drajan's hand on her waist. Not the hand that had grabbed her wrist, not the hand that had pressed her pulse to his lips. A different hand, a gentler hand, a hand that cupped her hip as if she were something precious, something breakable, something worth holding carefully. She woke in the dark with her own hand pressed to her stomach and her heart racing, and a word on her lips that she had never said to any man. Not once, not ever. She did not say it aloud. She did not have to. The word was there, in the darkness, in the silence, in the space between her ribs, where her heart used to live before Victor Drajan had taken a bullet for her and called her his. No, she thought. No, no, no. But her body did not listen. Her body remembered the warmth of him, The weight of him, the way he had covered her like a roof in a storm. And her body, unlike her heart, was not a liar. She did not sleep again that night. She lay awake until the sun rose, watching the light creep across her daughter's toys, her daughter's shoes, her daughter's small pink bicycle hidden in the closet. She thought about running. She had the money now. She could leave tonight, take her daughter, disappear into a city where no one knew Victor Drazen's name. But she did not move. She stayed. Because running, she was beginning to understand, was not the opposite of fear. Staying was. And Mira Thorne had never been a coward. She just wished she knew the difference between courage and stupidity, between survival and surrender, between a man who loved her and a man who wanted to own her. Because Victor Drazen was both. And that, more than the bullet or the blood or the whispered words in the dark, was what kept her awake. At 6 a.m., her daughter padded into the room, climbed into the bed, and pressed a small warm hand to Myra's cheek. Asterisk, Mommy, you look sad. Asterisk. Mira kissed the top of her daughter's head. Asterisk, I'm not sad, sweetheart. I'm just thinking. Asterisk. Asterisk about what? Asterisk. Asterisk about whether people can change. Asterisk. Her daughter considered this with the grave seriousness of a child who had not yet learned that some questions have no answers. Asterisk. My teacher says people can change if they want to, but they have to want it very much. Asterisk. Mira held her daughter close. She thought of Victor's face when he had said you're mine. She thought of his hands, flat on his thighs, ready to strike. She thought of his voice, raw and scraped clean, whispering you saved me. She did not know if he wanted to change. She did not know if he even knew what change meant. But she knew, with a certainty that felt like falling, that she was no longer just cutting his hair. She was watching him, waiting, seeing if the cracks in the wall would widen into doors or collapse into rubble. And she knew, with a certainty that felt like drowning, that she was no longer sure which outcome she hoped for. The weeks after the shooting were different. Victor was quieter, but his quiet had changed. Before, his silence had been a wall. Now it was a wound, something healing, something tender, something that Mira found herself wanting to touch even though she knew better. She continued to cut his hair on Tuesdays and Thursdays. She continued to refuse his gifts, his money beyond her wages, his attempts to learn her daughter's name. But she no longer left immediately after finishing. She stayed for a few minutes, then 10, then 20. They talked about nothing, the weather, a book she had read, a memory he had of a dog he owned as a boy before his father drowned it in a rain barrel. She did not comfort him when he told her about the dog, but she did not leave either. That was the difference. Roman noticed. Victor's older brother had been absent during the shooting, traveling, Victor said, on business. But he returned on a gray Tuesday in December, letting himself into the penthouse with his own key while Mira was combing out Victor's hair. Roman was taller than Victor, broader, with the same dark eyes and none of the restraint. He looked at Mira the way a butcher looks at a side of beef, assessing, calculating, already dividing her into parts. He did not introduce himself. He did not acknowledge her presence at all. He simply stood in the doorway of the makeshift salon and said to Victor, Asterisk, we need to talk. Alone. Asterisk. Victor did not move. Asterisk, whatever you need to say, you can say in front of her. Asterisk. Roman's eyes flicked to Mira. He smiled. It was not a nice smile. Asterisk, can I? Asterisk. Mira set down her scissors. She gathered her things. She was not a fool. She knew when a room had turned against her, even if the threat was not yet spoken. I'll come back Thursday, she said. Victor reached for her wrist, the same gesture as the night of the shooting, but gentler now, almost questioning. She pulled away. She walked to the elevator. She did not look back, but she felt Roman's eyes on her until the doors closed. She should have taken her daughter and left that night. She knew that now, in retrospect, the way all women know the exact moment they should have run. But she did not run, because Victor called her that evening and said, Asterisk, Roman is gone. He will not bother you again. Asterisk, and she believed him, because she wanted to believe him, because believing him was easier than packing a suitcase and explaining to a 6-year-old why they had to leave their home, their school, their pink bicycle hidden in the closet. 3 days later, Mira arrived at the penthouse for her Thursday appointment. Victor was not there. Sergei met her at the door with a face like carved stone. "There has been a situation," he said. Asterisk, "you need to come with me." Asterisk. She did not ask what kind of situation. She followed Sergei to a black car, sat in the back seat, and watched the city slide past the windows. They drove for 40 minutes, past the neighborhoods she knew and into ones she did not. Warehouses, empty lots, buildings with boarded windows and no names. Sergei stopped the car outside a chain-link fence topped with razor wire. He got out. He opened her door. He said, asterisk, "He will want to see you first, before anyone else." Asterisk. Mira did not ask who. She walked through a gate, across a concrete yard, into a building that smelled of rust and old blood. The room was large, empty except for a chair in the center. A man was tied to the chair. His face was swollen, his clothes torn, his hands bound behind his back with the same kind of zip tie Mira had seen in the storage room months ago. But she recognized him anyway. Roman, Victor's brother, the man who had smiled at her like a butcher. Victor stood near the wall, his back to her. His hands were clasped behind him. His shoulders were tense. When he turned, she saw that his face was not angry. It was worse. It was empty. The cracks had sealed over. The wall was back, higher than before, and behind it she could feel something enormous and terrible pressing to get out. "He took her," Victor said. No greeting, no explanation, just those 3 words, flat and dead. Myra's blood turned to ice. Asterisk who? Asterisk. Asterisk, your daughter. Asterisk. The world stopped. Not metaphorically. Literally. The air froze. The light died. Myra's heart, which had been beating a moment ago, simply ceased to exist in her chest. She looked at Roman. Roman, who was bleeding from a cut above his eye, who had one nostril caked with dried blood, who was smiling through split lips. He nodded at her. Asterisk, she's fine. For now. The boy I left with her has instructions. If Victor steps down as boss tonight, she walks free. If not. Asterisk, he shrugged. The gesture made grotesque by the rope's asterisk. Children are resilient, but not that resilient. Asterisk. Mira did not scream. She did not cry. She walked across the concrete floor, past Victor, past Sergei, past every man in that room who was waiting for her to collapse. She stopped in front of Roman's chair. She looked at his face, the face of a man who had taken her daughter, her 6-year-old daughter, who was afraid of the dark and loved macaroni and cheese, and had just learned to tie her own shoes. And she said, very quietly, asterisk, where is she? Asterisk. Roman laughed. It was a wet, ugly sound. Asterisk. You think I'm going to tell you? You're just the hairdresser. You're nothing. Asterisk. Mira turned to Victor. He was watching her with an expression she had never seen before. Not hunger, not obsession, but something that looked almost like fear. Not fear of Roman. Fear of her. Of what she might become. Of what he had done to her by bringing her into his world. Find her, she said. Her voice was calm. Too calm. The calm of a woman who had already imagined every possible outcome and chosen the one where her daughter survived. Asterisk, find her right now, Victor. Or I swear to God, I will kill him myself, and then I will kill you. Asterisk. Victor nodded. He turned to Sergei. Asterisk, bring me every man we have. I want the city turned over. Every warehouse, every safe house, every basement. I want my niece back in 1 hour, or I will start executing people until someone talks. Asterisk. Sergei left. The room emptied. Only Mira, Victor, and Roman remained. Roman was still smiling. Victor walked to his brother, crouched down, and spoke in a voice so low that Mira almost did not hear it. Asterisk. You made one mistake, Roman. You thought she was a weakness. She's not. She's the only reason I haven't killed you already. Because if I kill you, I can't make you tell me where the child is. But once I have her. Asterisk, he stood up. Asterisk, once I have her, I am going to show you what I learned from our father. The things I never told you I remembered. Asterisk. Roman's smile faltered. For the first time, he looked afraid. Mira did not wait. She walked out of the warehouse, into the cold December air, and stood alone in the concrete yard with her arms wrapped around her body. She did not pray. She did not cry. She counted her breaths. In, out, in, out. She thought about her daughter's hands, small and warm, pressing against her cheek that morning before school. Asterisk, Mommy, you look sad. Asterisk, she had not known that would be the last normal moment. She had not known to memorize it. 47 minutes later, her phone rang. Victor's voice. Hoarse. Shaking. Asterisk, we have her. She's safe. She's not hurt. She's asking for you. Asterisk. Mira did not remember getting into the car. She did not remember the drive. She did not remember running through the doors of a safe house she had never seen, past men with guns, up a flight of stairs, into a room where her daughter sat on a couch eating a bowl of soup wrapped in a blanket that was not hers. The girl looked up. Her eyes were red from crying, but she was whole, unharmed, alive. Mommy, she said, and Mira fell to her knees and held her daughter so tightly that the girl squeaked in protest. She did not let go for a long time. She did not cry. She would cry later alone, in the shower, where her daughter could not hear. But not yet. Not here. Victor stood in the doorway. His clothes were torn. His knuckles were bleeding. There was a bruise forming on his jaw that had not been there an hour ago. He looked at Mira holding her daughter, and something in his face broke. The wall cracked. The emptiness filled with something raw and unprotected. I killed him, he said, quietly, as if confessing. Asterisk Roman. I killed him. Not because he took her. Because he made you afraid. I never wanted you to be afraid. Asterisk. Mira looked up from her daughter's hair. She looked at Victor, at the blood on his hands, the bruise on his jaw, the broken thing behind his eyes. And something in her broke too. Not her resolve. Not her refusal. Something deeper. Something that had been holding her upright for months. Telling her that she could keep him at arm's length. That she could take his money and cut his hair and never let him in. She stood up. She walked to him. She raised her hand, and she slapped him across the face. The sound cracked through the room like a gunshot. Her daughter gasped. Victor did not move. He did not raise his hand to his cheek. He simply stood there and took it. The way he had taken the bullet. The way he had taken her silence and her refusal and her steady, unyielding no for all these months. You think bringing her back makes you a hero. Myra's voice was not calm anymore. It was fire. It was years of fear and hunger and watching her daughter go without, so that Mira could pretend she was not drowning. You think this erases what you are? You are the reason she was taken. You and your brother and your empire and your blood. You brought this to my door. You put my daughter in a room with a man who had zip ties and instructions. You did this. Victor said nothing. He did not argue. He did not defend himself. He stood in the doorway with his bleeding knuckles and his broken face, and he took every word like a blade. I told you, Mira continued, her voice rising, her hand shaking now, finally shaking. I told you I would never love you. I told you I was not yours. And you didn't listen. You never listened. You just kept building me chairs and buying me diamonds and taking bullets like those things could make up for the fact that you are a monster. She stopped. She was crying. She had not meant to cry. The tears were hot and humiliating, and they would not stop. Her daughter was watching, wide-eyed, still holding her spoon. Mira turned away from Victor. She could not look at him. She could not look at her daughter. She pressed her hands to her face and tried to remember how to breathe. Then she felt it. A touch. Not on her wrist. On her hand. Victor had crossed the room. He had knelt down. This man who had killed his own brother an hour ago. This man who owned buildings and bodies and the silence of everyone who knew his name. He had knelt down on the floor in front of her, and he had taken her hands in his. His palms were rough. His fingers were cold. He pulled her hands away from her face and looked up at her with eyes that were no longer flat, no longer dark, no longer anything except human. Then tell me what to do, he said. His voice cracked on the last word. Asterisk, tell me how to fix it. Tell me what to burn, what to destroy, what to give up. I will do it. I will burn it all. The empire, the money, the name. I will walk away from everything and become nothing if that is what you need. Just tell me. Please. Mira stared at him. This man on his knees. This killer begging. She had wanted him to break. She had dreamed of it, in her darkest moments, when she hated him for what he was and hated herself for staying. But now that he was broken, now that he was kneeling at her feet with blood on his hands and tears in his eyes that he would not let fall, she felt no triumph, only terror, because she realized, in that moment, that she had the power to destroy him, and that power was not a gift. It was a cage. It meant she cared. "Burn it," she whispered. Asterisk all of it. Victor closed his eyes. He nodded. He pressed his forehead to her hands, just for a second, just long enough for her to feel the heat of his skin, the tremor in his shoulders. Then he stood up. He walked to the door. He looked back at her once and said, "Wait for me. 3 days. Then I will be nothing, and you can decide if nothing is enough." He left. Mira stood in the middle of the room with her daughter's arms around her legs and her own arms hanging at her sides. She did not know if 3 days was enough time for a man to burn an empire. She did not know if any amount of fire could cleanse the blood from Victor Drajan's hands. But she knew, with a certainty that felt like falling, that she had just given him the only thing she had left to give. She had given him a chance, and she was terrified that he would take it. 3 days passed. Mira did not see Victor. She did not hear from him. The news reported a warehouse explosion on the waterfront, a fire that consumed an entire block, several bodies recovered, but not yet identified. A private investment firm dissolved overnight. A man named Sergei surrendered to federal authorities with a suitcase full of evidence against a criminal network that stretched across 3 states. The papers called it an unprecedented collapse. Mira called it what it was, a funeral. She did not wait and hope. She packed her daughter's pink bicycle, her grandmother's razor, and 3 changes of clothes into 2 suitcases. She left the diamond hairpins in the dumpster where they belonged. She did not look back at the apartment, at the salon, at the city that had tried to eat her alive. She drove for 18 hours with her daughter sleeping in the back seat, until the city was nothing but a smear of light in the rearview mirror. She found a small town with a small house and a small school and a small salon that needed a stylist. She paid cash for 6 months' rent. She did not tell anyone her real name. On the 4th night, she heard a knock. Not at the front door, at the back door, the one that led to the tiny yard where her daughter had already planted marigolds in a coffee can. Mira picked up her grandmother's razor. She opened the door. Victor stood in the darkness. He was thinner. His left arm was in a sling, the same shoulder that had taken the bullet, now bandaged again, fresh blood seeping through the gauze. His clothes were cheap, nothing like the suit she remembered. His face was bruised, his hair unkempt, his eyes hollow. He looked like a man who had walked through fire and come out the other side with nothing but the ashes on his skin. "It's done," he said. His voice was raw. He had not shaved in days. "Sergei is in custody. The empire is gone. Roman is dead by my hand, and I will answer for that someday, but not today. Today I have nothing. No men, no money, no name that isn't burned." He reached into his pocket. Mira tensed. He pulled out a simple steel hairpin. Not diamond, not gold, just metal. Just a tool. Just something to hold hair away from a woman's face. He held it out to her. "This is all I have left." Mira looked at the hairpin. She looked at Victor. She looked at her daughter's marigolds, brave and small in the darkness. She thought about everything he had taken from her. Her peace, her security, her careful distance. She thought about everything he had given her. His body as a shield, his empire as an offering, his pride as a broken thing at her feet. She thought about the word she had almost said in the dark, alone in her bed, before she knew if he was worth it. She took the hairpin. "You'll need a haircut in 3 weeks," she said. Her voice was steady, not cold, not warm. Something new, something that belonged only to her. Same rate, no discounts, no gifts, no talk of empires or brothers or blood. You come in, you sit down, you let me cut your hair, and then you leave. Victor nodded. He did not smile. He did not reach for her. He simply stood in the darkness with his cheap clothes and his bandaged arm and his empty hands, and he waited. He was good at waiting. He had been waiting for her for months. He would wait longer if he had to. Mira closed the door. She leaned her forehead against the wood. Her daughter was asleep in the next room. The marigolds were still standing. The hairpin was warm in her palm. She counted her breaths. In, out, in, out. Then she opened the door again. Victor was still there. He had not moved. He had not knocked again. He was simply standing in the dark, looking at the ground, looking like a man who had learned that some doors do not open twice. 3 weeks, Mira said. Not a day sooner. 3 weeks, he agreed. She closed the door. This time, she did not lean against it. She walked to her daughter's room, checked the blankets, kissed a small forehead. She walked to her own room, set the steel hairpin on the nightstand, and laid down in the dark. She did not dream of Victor's hand on her waist. She did not need to. She was learning that love was not a feeling. Love was a door, and she had just left it open. If you want to read more dark romance stories of obsession, refusal, and slow burn redemption, subscribe now for early access to the full novel, bonus chapters from Victor's perspective, and exclusive content delivered straight to your inbox. Don't miss the next chapter of Mira and Victor's story. Hit subscribe today.
That's the end of the story. I hope you really loved it. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe. Don't forget to turn on your notification button till the next story. Stay dangerous.